Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching Current Affair with Dr. Malik and Professor Grant Pitman. And I'm your host. This is our weekly talk show. And every week we discuss most of the time what happens in this week. And today we have agenda. First of all, I'd like to thank Professor Grant Pitman. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. And I'd like to thank to Dr. Malik also. Today we would like to discuss about the progress of the farmer protest and the COVID, especially the COVID in the Perth, how it's going, what happened, and how the public response on this one. We were also going to discuss about the PM visit to the Darwin and where he is trying to enhance the opportunities and create more jobs to handle the COVID financial upset. And then we will going to discuss about the COVID vaccine startup in Australia. But before starting this agenda, I'd like to share a very sorrow news that there was in South Brisbane, in Column Wave, there was a gang rape reported. But we don't like to discuss the gang report because a gang rape. I'd like to know from Dr. Malik and Professor Pitman exactly that how we can enhance awareness of our community. If some incident happen, any incident happen, how good and how quickly it need to be reported. The reason for this one, because the incident happened on 28th of December and the formal complaint launched on the 16th of January, and then later on the search is started. We don't like to go in detail why the delay is there, but because this incident, we like to enhance, take the opportunity. Professor Pitman, I like to raise these things to you first. You've been part of the police, you've been part of the system maker, and you know most of the things that how quick it need to be reported and why it should be reported very quickly. And then I will go to the Dr. Malik, living in heaven land. What do you think that we should do more to avoid from these incidents? So Professor Pitman, sir, what we can do, what do you think that how quick it should be reported, and what is the problem if it is delays in reporting of these incidents or in these kind of incidents?
They always encourage you to report soon after the crime because they want to collect the sufficient evidence to be able to carry out the investigations and ultimately the court hearing. When it comes to personal crimes, in this case involving a young lady, the difficulty is perhaps shame, sometimes fear, sometimes the embarrassment of the incident involving them personally. Sometimes they may not understand the law. Sometimes it's difficult to talk to parents or relatives or friends, including the police. But in terms of the investigation and dealing with those who are involved in the crime, the sooner the matter is brought before the investigating authorities, the much easier it is to investigate it and to bring the people who have been responsible before the courts. So in this particular case, I'm not aware of all the details, but it's a personal crime and that affects people personally and how they deal with it.
Right. So Professor Pitman, when you say that the incident, so if you report late and very late, then ultimately your case is going to be weak because they can't collect the more evidence on your basis. And do you think that we have a system, counseling system, that if something happen and people feel shy, some counselor is coming and explaining them, okay, why you have to report? Or do we have something in community where the government, state government is doing something to encourage the kids in schools that these things should be reported immediately?
Oh, look, if we were back, say, 30, 40, 50 years ago, intervention strategies and consultation and advice groups and government resources were somewhat limited. But now the police have very good victim of crime capabilities to look after victims of crime. Usually most state governments have some excellent field workers and specialist psychologists and psychiatrists to offer help. And even in the private sector, doctors are well trained in this area, and emergency departments. So the support for personal crime is quite extraordinary now compared to, say, 30 or 40 years ago. So there are plenty of resources, but sometimes it's the fear or the guilt or just having this occur to you. People don't want to report, and then they don't get access to the resources, and of course they then have difficulty coping with it in later life in terms of their mental capacity.
Right. Thank you. I'll get back to you, and I'll try to understand that what is the personal crime and what is not the personal crime. Dr. Bernard Malik, sir, we belongs to a country where these incidents are not really reported like that, but here one incident is become like a fire to the community. What do you think, sir, that what can be done? Number one, that okay, and does these things can be avoided through some precaution measures?
I think the incident that took place with two 15-year-old young ladies is horrible. You cannot find words for condemnation. Pretty inhuman. There were gang rapes, and girls were, one of the ladies contacted this guy on Snapchat. So that brings another aspect of social media, the crimes of social media. And we should not let these little kids have access to social media and the phones. But nowadays phone is one of the main sources to stay in touch with you. A young kid starts going to school, the only way you can stay in touch with him or her is by giving them a phone.
Right.
So this is one of the bad things that can happen. We need to bring more awareness to our young kids, how to behave in a situation like this, and I think our schools are great. Well, in this country, the way crime system is, the way young people behave is totally different as opposed to our country there. In our country, I think the reporting average is very low, maybe 5 or 10% crimes reported. Over here, of course, I'm not very familiar with the numbers, but here the reporting is very high.
Very high.
And the better part is that justice system is impartial. It doesn't matter how powerful you are, who you are, and who you know. A crime is a crime, and they take you to court and they condemn you to whatever punishment you can. And especially in the case of juvenile crime, where the girls are only 15-year-old, I think nobody would have any sympathy in making sure that these bastards go to jail.
Right. Malik sir, before going to Professor Pitman, just one thing with the experience, you are a father, I'm a father too also. Do you think, because I like to raise the same question to Professor Pitman, but again, it's a very culture to culture, person to person. Do you think these incidents need to be discussed with the family, and in order to have some kind of how should not use the social media? What are the problems there, and what could happen there? Do you think it's a good to talk, or it's not a good to talk?
Absolutely to talk. I think we people who are from subcontinent have a little hesitation discussing it with our daughters, but maybe we leave this role to our wives, mothers, to discuss it, and with the boys we discuss it as fathers. It is very, very critical that you make them aware that these things happen there, so they are aware. Like my boy has Snapchat, and every now and then I go and delete it, and he has it back again, and he deletes it again. But what I do is I keep a strict watch over it, and I tell him, don't befriend strangers, people that you do not know. Don't become friends. He has his inner circle of friends where 4 or 5 of them, I said, yeah, I'm okay with that. And they come home and they stay overnight here. And while they are overnight here, I get to know his friends. It is very, very critical to know the friends of your kids. Then you know who they should hang out and who they should not hang out.
Right.
Of course, our kids have to have our confidence in terms of if they do anything wrong, they can walk up to Mr. Zaidi or Mr. Malik and say, Dad, I messed up, I'm sorry. And then you say, okay, come on, son, let's have a discussion and don't worry about it. Let's find a solution.
Right.
But discussion is absolutely must.
Must. Professor Pitman, we would like to know what is the personal crime and what is not the personal crime. Would you explain a little bit more?
In Australia, all of the states record their statistics so that there's not only state statistics, there's national statistics, and they've tried to reconcile the statistics so that it means similar things. And in Australia, personal crime usually relates to where there's a victim, as against a non-personal, which is there's no victims involved. So the issue of the rape it's a personal crime because there's a victim. Something like drug use would be seen as a non-personal crime. In other words, there's no victim, although some would argue the offender is the victim at the end of the day. So it's a term used by police in Australia, and it's usually seen in the crime reports in Australia, and they tend to try to relate it to what are victims and what aren't.
Right. Thank you. I think it's very clear for all of our viewers. Ultimately, the reason for this one, because TV Asia is actually trying to enhance the community awareness of these things which are normally not discussed and nobody knows since a long time until he going or she is going to face that same thing. Coming back to my second part, in our system, we already have, as I already discussed with Dr. Malik, in our system, we already have a issue that we are not very friendly to our kids in our system. We are very reluctant to discuss these kind of things. In Australian system, do you think these incidents should be discussed in the family and just to give them, create a kind of fear? I don't know, maybe it's the right word or something else. Professor, this is with you. Professor Grant?
One of the dilemmas in Australia is many of our families are dysfunctional families.
Yeah.
In other words, there's not always a mum and a dad. It could be either or.
Right.
And and I don't think it's much different from India. Men tend to leave it to the mothers to handle, and we probably don't take ownership of it. And probably communications now has been changed dramatically where to talk to your children, you've got to get onto Facebook or Twitter now for them to listen to you. Whereas in the old days, you'd sit down for a meal and you'd discuss what was going on in school and what they'd done at work or what had happened around the home. But now, if you're not on Facebook or Twitter or one of the other social medias, devices and systems, your children probably won't talk to you.
So it's a challenging one, but again, it's a beneficial to talk, to have a discussion. Dr. Malik, coming back to now, is from the South Brisbane, and we are from Queensland. We would like to move to India, and we would like to know from Dr. Malik, sir, what's happening? What is the progress till today of the farmer protest? Where are we standing?
Farmer protest, as you know, has been going on for months. Over 2 months now, even in Delhi, surrounding areas. On 26th of January, on Republic Day, there was a 200,000 tractor march was done in Delhi. As you would be aware, there will be some nuisance every now and then when there are more than 2 people, something will happen. So there was a slight incident of these people deviating from march route into Red Fort.
Right.
And some of these people posted a flag of a particular religion there. And while no disrespect was shown to Indian flag, which stood up higher, I think this was made into a political issue. And people went back home, most of them, thinking that the agitation is over. But Uttar Pradesh, that part of the country, the border that touches Delhi, there is a big leader called Rakesh Takat. Rakesh Takat's father was, to this day, the biggest Kisan, biggest farmer leader in the country.
Right.
And at his one call, the governments would change. He was that powerful. But he passed away in 2011 at very advanced age, and now his son took up a leadership. All
Right.
the protest, he was considered very weak and very timid leader until it came to show. So government wanted to oppress it high-handedly, and they registered FIRs, cases against all these farmer leaders. And they wanted to arrest him. So he wanted to be arrested peacefully. He said, no problem, you come, we'll surrender.
Right.
But while a couple of legislators of BJP, the ruling party in the state and in the center, were out there with some of the rogue elements, the gundas, but there they wanted to beat up on these people that were sitting on protest and people who were returning home from protest. When Mr. Takat found out that these people wanted to attack, he said, okay, now all the bets are off. You have to fight it out with us. He said, we will not surrender. I will not give up to the police. Either you take me, you shoot me, or I will commit suicide myself. But I will go get into your hands alive. And while addressing this, he became very emotional. He started crying. And though the internet has been banned in most parts of India because of the protest, national media refuses to carry any of the stories. Somehow this video of him crying leaked out. And then all of a sudden there was a flood of farmers coming back again.
Right.
Hundreds and thousands of farmers felt, no, this is the lot of a farmer. You have to cry, you have to scream, and they would still file cases against you. So the protest got life back. Now I think from that protest, it has become a revolution. People are out there protesting. They want government to repeal the law, and nothing less than that would be negotiated.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Manal, for giving the update. Professor Pitman, again, we know we discuss these things in most of our talk, and because it's moving every week, so ultimately we can't run without this discussion. But here there's a point that if look, there are two parties, and you've been part of many time from Australian government handling not the similar size of issue, but same type of issue. Now, if there is both parties stay on their side, everything has been done, lathi charge, water shelling, everything has been done from the force side, and from other side, all efforts has been done. All efforts, car rally, walk in, everything has been done. Now, in this case, do you think that, and it's very long, it's a month now, and ultimately something has to be done. Does this ice need to be break by someone, some third party, someone else within the country or outside the country? What do you think?
Look, I think the government's probably gone a bit too long with the farmers on this issue, and there needs to be a circuit breaker to resolve it. And I'm just amazed the government hasn't had a high-profile person who can negotiate between the government and the farmers a bit more constructively to try and see if they can come to some mediation or arbitration approach. Here in Australia, what we tend to do is our constitution says that we are to mediate in the first instance. In other words, try and find a way to resolve the differences.
Yeah.
And then we go to arbitration, which is the courts, and let the courts decide what is reasonable. And
Right.
I think that's worked well in Australia for many, many years, because the courts then can provide the independent arm of government to both back to the executive and parliament about how this matter should be dealt with or can be dealt with. So I think they really need a circuit breaker over there, because the last thing you want is a revolt amongst the people, because lives are lost and people's lifestyle is affected, and it has long-term consequences, because memory is extensive when there's people's lives are badly affected. So they need a circuit breaker.
Dr. Malik, I attend few protests. I made few interviews also from the farmer protesting, and last week also we find out that the people came out from their houses, and they proudly say that I'm not a farmer, but I'm supporting. So it's a big change. Now, circuit breaker. Do you think that in India constitution they have similar kind of approach, that either circuit breaker or Supreme Court? But we already know about the Supreme Court. So do you think that anyone can play major, big businessman, big tycoon from outside, from overseas country, can play a role of the circuit breaker, or in your information, does circuit breaking already done but it was failed?
Yes, what has happened in India is, I think this is an ego issue with the government there. This is a very simple theory that doesn't need any intervention from any side. It's not like there is a fight between government and the farmers. Government came out with the 3 new laws. Farmers say they are against us.
Right.
One needs to understand that majority of these Indian farmers are very small farmers, between 3 to 5 acres of land. So they barely make it. And government needs to take that into consideration before industrializing it. So what happens most of the time, when there is a very small farmer, he is not able to make decisions. And a big guy is making decision as to the minimum price of his produce, minimum price of the wheat, and then they can buy him out very quickly. I think government has to take a very strong decision and say, it's okay, we wanted to reform the sector, but I guess we are not prepared at the time. Farmers are not ready to accept what we want to do, so we repeal the law. It's as easy as that. It doesn't need any intervention. It just needs a willingness and a strong political will from the government to say, it's okay, we call it off.
Right. I think Dr. Malik and Professor Pitman, the solution for farmer issue, I think it's very clear, as long if someone is going to do it. Professor Pitman, lately, you know that last week we have again COVID cases in Perth. The issue is not the COVID case. There is 2 things we'd like to know from you, from my viewers. Number one is that every time nowadays these cases are coming from the security staff or the person those are involved in the quarantine services. So something is coming up from there. So it's a lack of a system in place that the people are serving in quarantine and they have this issue, and something has to be done. So it should stop on its it should fix on a time.
I think you've hit a very good point, actually. When you look at Australia, most of the current lockdowns for COVID have come out of quarantine locations, not out of the community in general.
Yeah.
And so one would have to ask the question, what are the procedures they have in place for quarantine, which allows these sorts of escalations in COVID lockdowns to occur so quickly. And certainly it appears to be the security
Yeah.
It would be interesting, and I'm taking a bit of an assumption here that probably over 50% of all the quarantine cases are linked to security guards. And it appears to be private security. And so the regulatory processes are not as good as if you had the military or police, which are governed more by the state. And the private sector, of course, tends to want to do things at the cheapest economical way without a lot of administrative overheads. So I'm not overtly critical of the private sector. We need them, and they provide tremendous resource, but they don't have strong regulations. And in this case, when a security guard can lock down a whole state again over a quarantine, one would have to question what's going on.
Right. Dr. Bernard, security breaches, and then it's based on the price we are paying to the private security. And again, as Professor Pitman rightly mentioned, that we don't have any issue with the private security. The issue is only that we are sacrificing the life of the people on the basis of the, low paid economical services rather than going for strict system. And you are a businessman, you already, and again, when you are developing a system, you like to have the checklist, you like to have something, and if something happens repeating, then measures ultimately going to be changed. And this incident happened many times. What do you think that how we can handle this?
I think there is always learning and unlearning when we undertake anything.
Right.
So what happened in Victoria? It was security people, private security, that spread it. What happened in Western Australia? Again, one security guard. And think, when you have 5 days lockdown in a state, how much economic impact it has, other than the physical uncomfort and the people hardship that they go through. If you consider all those things, I think it's better to go with the higher grade of security, or even hand it over to police. But I'm sure a state is limited in terms of resources, and they don't want to deploy military because it can send a wrong message.
Absolutely.
Military is always in time of extreme crisis and rarely used on soil. It's always, military is for countries outside than their own homeland. Having said that, yes, I think we need to have more checks and balances, even with the private security. But on the defense, what happened in this case was, yes, the guy went to deliver medication to the guy and contracted it. Yes, there should have been other ways of delivery of medication. And we have learned enough in last 1 year how to handle it. So there should be zero tolerance, because the impact economically and socially of a lockdown is immeasurable.
Yes, I think these things could maybe avoided with using the drones delivery services, because that's already introduced, and in some countries. Professor Pitman, similar in the second part of this incident, that whenever the COVID cases are coming, the people get panic. However, it's almost 1 year. We know the behavior of the COVID, and we know that things are going. We have many good people also, but there are still some people that when it's getting, you will find all malls are empty, and the actual needy one, like aged people, old age people, or disabled people, then they still planning to do something, but nothing is available for them. How we can stop doing this practice, that once the COVID cases came and people are just going and thinking, oh, it's going to be, it never happened in Australia that you are going to have no food for 14 days or anything like that. But every time it happened, what state can do, what the system can be done?
I think there's a series of things going on. I think the rollout with the COVID vaccination is starting to emerge here in Australia.
Yeah.
So there's a view about whether or not Australia will come out of it in a timely manner. The second thing is, I think Australians are now getting a little bit sick of all of a sudden they've got the British COVID virus floating around and we're locking everything down again. Certainly the Prime Minister had a bit to say to the Queensland Premier about locking down the state and now wanting additional money to look after the tourism industry. And the Prime Minister said, well, hang on, you set an agenda to lock your state down, you won an election on it, that's your decision, not mine. So what are you offering the tourism industry? So you've got this dichotomy or difference between personal health and community health versus your economic benefit. And I think the third thing that's starting to emerge more and more is that people want some regularity. In other words, from what I understand, a flight from Western Australia was to land in ACT or Queensland last night, and they decided to quarantine them, and they were in mid-air when the decision was made. Well, fancy getting off the plane knowing you're going to be locked up for 14 days and you had no idea at all. Well, you know, that's going probably a little, the pendulum has gone too far to the other extreme. There's other processes in place to help them, but I think the public's now getting a little wary of what's going on, and they're reacting to it by changing their behaviour externally. And certainly I think Victorians have issued, or New South Wales have issued hundreds and thousands of offence notices because of the inconsistency and constant changes. I don't know if I'm allowed in or out of my house these days. So.
Right. Dr. Bernard Malik. Now, this is the case. You are one of the community members or community leaders. Those are always trying to support the community in this situation. You know, bringing the food, keeping the storage. But this is a people who those are already open to everyone. But in this case, like whenever the COVID cases came, people get panic. What do you think that what could be the reason? And I never say it's a wrong from the media, like media enhance the, you know, hypothetically the, oh, it's getting worse or something would be it's a UK strain. So why do you think, or it's a human behavior, it's a human nature that some people always like that?
Look, I think there is a lot of political price to be paid for mistakes that these leaders make. I was having discussion with one of my doctors. He's a very senior doctor. He's ENT specialist who knows a lot about virus and how it can be cured and the mutation that it is having. And then immediately the topic came up. He knows my ties to the land, US, and he said, oh, now you should be happy. Biden has come. So I said, why did Trump have to go? He said, because of coronavirus. He said he did not handle it properly. And so when there are higher things at stake, no leader wants to be seen as weak. So they would rather make a mistake in handling it in terms of being too strict and get some flag for it than to be considered, oh, I didn't care. So I think that's the whole issue. That is why one small case in Western Australia, the whole state is shut down for 5 days. And then,
yeah, and Doctor, just Professor Pitman, he also just mentioned about that, closing the state and then promoting the tourism. You know, again, politics in coming up and up and up, and a time is coming when the people are trying to save that what we done is. However, they done two different things, 180-degree offset, but they're still defending both of them. Dr. Bernard, COVID vaccine also going to be introduced, and there is again different conspiracies around there. This could happen, this could not happen. So what is your research on this, and what do you going to advise to our viewers if they've been advised to have the COVID vaccine?
Interestingly, I had a lengthy discussion with this doctor who is also a professor of medicine.
Right.
He brought it to me. I told him what will happen. Will one size fit all in terms of will one thing, as this vaccine is constantly mutating. He said, look, the core vaccine, the core virus can be treated. And
Right.
some little variations to it, whether it is Indian strain or Pakistani strain or Australian strain. He said, as long as we treat the core virus, it should be fine. Okay, as you discussed in terms of Australia, the rollout plan is, the good news is that it's going to start this month. They're going to start vaccinating this month. And they only have 5 million vaccinations, and our population is 25 million. So they're going to be cherry picking. The first people to be vaccinated will be people from aged cares, people who are in the front line, and people who are dealing with hotel quarantine. And then adults who are below 50 would be last ones. So all three of us won't qualify this time.
This time. Professor Pitman, this is the vaccine, and this is a completely differently introduced, or maybe in our time, this is the first time everyone knows vaccine. In previously, there was many, virus and sicknesses came and vaccine introduced and vaccine used, but most of the time it was not known. In your time, do you think that like malaria or previously any vaccine has a similar kind of weightage or distribution or discussion? It's a good, it's a bad, it's not, it's going to impact on the male on this way or female on this way. Do you think that these debates always start when the vaccine is started in Australia?
I think historically we treated doctors as all knowing, all seeing. And if they told us that we needed a needle for whatever, we just accepted them as being the authority on the figure, on the subject. The dilemma now is even amongst the doctors, they disagree. And so you got expert against, or expert giving other experts expert advice. And so the public now sees confusion amongst the experts. I think the other thing is Australia's had a couple of issues with vaccinations and needles, and they've had a couple of experiences with the international area where vaccinations have affected people's lives. And quite often government don't support you financially for the rest of your life if those vaccines cause disability. So there's that anxiety. And I think the big issue is the economic issue, is the cost for it, who gets it, how you get it, when you get it, and then it will affect employees and employers. Dr. Bernard will have to decide if his lecturer doesn't get the vaccination, and the guidelines for his institution is that unless they get the vaccination, they can't lecture there. Then what's he doing, and how does he handle that? So this whole thing rolls over into not only your personal life, but your public life and into your commercial sector. So it's only the start of the journey, not the end.
Right. Dr. Bernard, like you mentioned earlier that they are going to vaccinate the first line and older people, but in some other countries they only use the first line of services provider, and people are expecting the results from them. And there was one incident happened that someone has a COVID vaccine, and then he feel differently, he gets sick and all these things. So in other country where they are just waiting for the people to respond, but and then it's a good time for people to decide. But as Professor Pitman says that here, if you are going to have the vaccine, if something happen, disability, the state will not going to look after you. This I understand. However, in other case, it is also rumors that if you did not take the medicine and something happened, the state will not going to look after you.
Look, a couple of things I want to add to what Professor Pitman said.
Right.
Interestingly, in Australia, the vaccine is going to be free of charge.
Good.
Federal government will pay for everyone to be vaccinated. As I said, Pfizer is the first vaccine that's coming around and will have 5 million doses. But then they're bringing in another one, Oxford AstraZeneca vaccination, and that would be 50 million. So government hopes to get everybody vaccinated by end of October, which is really great news. So this year, in another 8 months, everybody would be vaccinated. That's point one. And then in terms of vaccine not affecting quickly, I think you shared and I shared a case of congressman in US when he was vaccinated and he got coronavirus sick. Positive after that. And I asked this from this doctor and he said, look, it takes 24 hours the vaccine to take effect. So maybe during that incubation time, if it happened, it happened. And as Professor Pitman said, there are so many different opinions on this. No one has been able to really sit down and have one thing that, okay, if you have headache, take this medicine and you'll be fine. With so many different shades and so many different strains coming along and so many different opinions, we are still not able to have a consensus as to what will happen.
Professor Pitman, we don't have the consensus, but do you think that the state have authority to implement as a law for everyone to have the vaccine?
At the present time, the government can only basically ask the public to receive it, but then they can legislate. And as I said, Dr. Bernard could see a piece of legislation that comes out that says in educational institutions, unless all lecturers are vaccinated, they can't lecture at the institute. The government can pass legislation like that quite simply. And then Dr. Bernard has the dilemma, how do I manage my institute in terms of delivering lectures if I can't, if a number of my lecturers refuse to have it on the grounds of health or whatever else. And unless they're exempt, then the government's regulation affects his business, is an illustration. So they're still suggesting that not 100% will take the vaccination, and some of the research is showing anything up to probably 80% only will take it. So that's not all, it's not 100%.
Yes.
So, and even today, many children in our kindergartens, parents have decided not to give them the childhood vaccinations. So a lot of the diseases that were stopped a century ago, some of our children are now picking up because parents don't want vaccinations. So it's going to be, they call it the moral dilemma for politicians and people who are operating businesses in the public sector in Australia. So.
Dr. Bernard Malik, moral dilemma. So this is the case, and it's really amazing. A very good point raised by Professor Pitman, that if maximum if the 80% people take the vaccine, but still you have the risk of the 20% people. And again, if it is the risk of the 20% of the people, I don't know how the vaccine will behave. Like if some COVID contacted someone who has a vaccine, does it permanently stabilize and never going to be catch the COVID again? I don't know. So do you think that it will always remain open debate for the number of vaccine, Dr. Bernard?
I think, look, until medical community is able to give you the confidence that the vaccine is fully going to work and is healthy for you, this debate will stay alive. And it happens with flu vaccine too. When you take flu shots, sometimes you go home and you get sick. See, all everybody is trying to do, it's not a business that they're going to commercially benefit out of it. It is for people's health, and everybody's bodies react differently to anything you take. So I think we have to give the benefit of doubt and benefit of being nice to the health community, that whatever they do would be good. Debate will always be there. I mean, they debated Prophet Muhammad, they debated Lord Jesus Christ, and they debate you and me and Professor Pitman.
Yeah, actually, you are absolutely right, sir. Debates, I think if it is in positive, you always get something like in our show. We always have a debate, and we are trying to bring, we never try to be a part of any controversy. We have educated people, expert people, and ultimately it's an honor for TV Asia that we are going to bring something for our community. Ultimately, it's a pride of the TV Asia. I think it's over from me. Thank you, Dr. Bernard Malik. We are going to discuss next week, because Prime Minister Scott Morrison has visited Darwin, and then they investing a lot of money on the manufacturing facility. They are looking that jobs will be created. So next week we are going to discuss mostly about that, how the jobs is going to be created and how it's going to be useful, or does it going to be only regional area or not in the city area. So today we cover few topics, and we wish that God help farmers for their protest, and ultimately every week we are expecting that next week is going to be much better than week. COVID vaccine is good for everyone, and I wish this country and every country must be safe from the COVID vaccine. And I believe that next week when we come back for this show, the Perth situation will be different than today. Again, thanks to Dr. Bernard Malik for his time. Thanks to Professor Grant Pitman for his time. And it's over from TV Asia. It's over from Shoaib Zaidi. See you next week, same time. Till then, goodbye. Thank you.